So good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the final day of the Oregon Active Transportation Summit 2022. My name is Andre Lightsey Walker. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Policy Transformation Manager at the Street Trust. And so happy to welcome you all to Imagining 82nd. I'm super duper excited to welcome our guest today, Zachary Lauritzen, who is the newly appointed 82nd Avenue Coalition and Project Manager for Oregon Walks. I had the personal pleasure of meeting Zachary in just my second week at the Street Trust and was instantly inspired by his knowledge and passion for transformative transportation policy. So you are all in for a treat this morning. I will be posting links in the chat, and I'll have to do that multiple times because as folks come into the room, they won't actually be able to see the chat history. So I ask that if you have direct questions, feel free to just send me a message directly. If you see a slide you really like, or you just want to take a screenshot of mine or Zachary's face, I won't request compensation, but do ask that you do use the hashtag OATS22. So I thank you all so much for being here. And without further ado, please welcome Zachary Lauritzen.
Well, good morning, everyone. You know, one of the things that I learned early on was expectations management really matters. So I'm going to reframe what Andre just said. I don't know anything. I'm really kind of goofballed, and this could be terrible. So just be aware. That's where we're going from. So my name is Zachary Lauritzen. So Andre, thank you for the welcome. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. So the first thing I want to do before we start anything at all is I just want to be totally open and honest, which is it's really hard to do this when I can't see anyone's faces, your grins, your grimaces, your laughs, your smiles. So if anyone wants to turn on your cameras, I would love to see you. I think it really matters. And I think it's really hard when we do this digital platform to have some of those interactions. So if you're willing and you're able, I welcome you to please do that. That'd be awesome. So the second thing I want to do is I want to kind of just make sure everyone knows what they're in for here. I think most of the sessions that I've been to has been receiving information. We've been talked to, and that's great. That's fine. That's a form of communication that's really important. But this session's a little bit different. I'm actually only going to be talking for about 15 minutes or so. And you all are actually going to do a lot of the thinking, and the creative juices are going to get flowing, and you're going to get to know each other a little bit. And that's one of my big goals, is actually to get you all a little more active in the Active Transportation Summit. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and so you can see it. All right. So what you have in store, my name is Zachary. I'm at Oregon Walks, and I am new. I've only been around for about 3 weeks at Oregon Walks. And I want to give you a little bit of like a history of who I am and where I fit into the whole piece. But before we do that, I'm going to break you into some small groups, and they're going to be a little get to know you activity. I'm going to warn you, you have about a minute in these breakout groups. Okay, so you're going to share your name. You can see it at the bottom here, your name, why you're at OATS, and then what's your active transportation passion? Like, what's the thing that gets you really excited? So I'll go first to kind of model what that looks like. So I'm Zachary Lauritzen. I'm actually an educator by trade. I was a high school teacher and high school administrator, and kind of made this shift over to Oregon Walks. I'm a dad of 2. My active transportation thing is whatever it is that gets people out of single occupancy vehicle car travel. And so that's walking, that's biking, that's scooting, that's rolling, that's transit, that's a combo of all of those kind of things. For me personally, the way that gets me most out is we've got a cargo bike. I can put my kids in the front. We can go for all over the place in town. We can go shopping. We can do all kinds of things. So that's what you're going to do here. I'm going to break you out into some groups, small groups, and we're going to take a look at getting to know each other a little bit. And here's my little teacher thing. The person, we're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So the person with the name at the end of the alphabet gets to go first. So Z for Zachary, I would get to go first. If you're Andre, you get to go last in your group. Andre, do you have a quick count on how many we have here?
It's looking, we have 20 participants.
Okay, great. I'm going to break you all out into some rooms. Again, you do not have very long, just like a minute or so. I'm going to put you into groups of about 3. And go ahead and introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about who you are. and go.
Hello. Well, this is really testing my alphabetical skills here. I know I'm last, so. But we'll also happily go first. Well, greetings, everyone. My name is Andre Lightsey Walker. I'm at Oates. Well, I'm the policy transformation manager at the Street Trust. And so this just falls into my work portfolio, but could imagine myself being here in any other role because I'm inspired by the ways people move through space. So happy to be here, and I'm excited to learn more about you all.
Hey, no one showed up in my breakout room. Could you pop me into a different one?
Yeah, well, this just join this one.
Okay.
This will work just fine.
And my Zoom client crashed, so I had to rejoin. So I lost my breakout room too.
Perfect. Well, we can get it rolling.
Hello, Allison. Hello, Andre.
Hi.
I'm Mike. I live down in Lake Oswego, but I'm very interested in improving our streets and making them safe for walking and biking everywhere.
Love that. Pleasure to meet you.
I must admit, I've driven on 82nd about 2 times in the last 5 years, so I
Wow.
don't have a good view of what it looks like.
Totally. I think Zachary will cover some of that today, I'm hoping so. But it's transforming, which I think is super exciting. Allison, please.
Okay, I brought everyone back, I think. Are we all back together? Yeah, is that right? All right.
There we are.
Okay. So a little chance to just get to know each other a little bit. Again, I think that's one of the things we lose when we do the digital online stuff. So can you see my screen? Can I get a yay, nay? Cool. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to spend about 10 minutes telling you a little bit about 82nd Avenue. It's a pretty unique street in our community. I'm going to give you some facts and some figures and then break you back out into some rooms. And you all will have a chance to visualize, what do you want 82nd to look like? Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you have a history of 82nd Avenue in your mind. Some of you are like, what is 82nd Avenue? Why is that terribly important? All those types of things. So hopefully after the end of 10 minutes, we'll all have at least a base piece of information about 82nd Avenue, and then we can use that creativity to work together. I'm going to stop for just a second. Any questions? Someone just jump in. Love it. Okay, here we go. So crash course. This does not do it justice, but we're going to rock and roll. If you have never been to Portland or you don't know 82nd Avenue, this is 82nd Avenue. It's the 213, Highway 213. Right 10 blocks, not even quite 10 blocks to the east is 205. That's the big interstate. And it runs all the way from the airport down to Clackamas. So that's what we're talking about. It's a big, long, straight road, depending on where you're measuring to and from, around 7-8 miles. So that's 82nd Avenue East. If you go back 100 years, this is 82nd and Halsey. This is where the Banfield Highway, the railroads go across and intersect 82nd. And it was just an unpaved rural road. If you fast forward about 15 years, you start to get some pavement. And this is looking north up here. Can you all see where my cursor is, or is that something you can't see? Yeah, okay. Right up here on the bluff, that would be where McDaniel High School is, formerly known as Madison High School. And back on the backside of this would be where we're now standing. This would be the Columbia River in the background. This would be Washington and the airport. So again, to try and frame where we were, this is in the 30s on 82nd Avenue, just a very, very rural road. If you go a little bit back down to the south, and you can see some single family housing, some gas stations, that kind of thing. If you move south, this is more like in the central part of 82nd Avenue, still in the 30s, super rural. It's known as like a farm access road. If you go a little bit further south to what is now Division, there used to be a golf complex there. It wasn't actually a full golf course, but it was a golf complex. You can see it was this 2-lane road. It's got some parking to give you a sense of what it looks like. And this is what is currently Gleason. And again, you can kind of get a sense of what it looked like about 80 years ago. Markets, etc. Okay, fast forward. That spot that was at Halsey in the teens, now you're in the 50s. This is run by the Oregon Department of Transportation. It is the Highway 213. They've improved this intersection. You can see where the railroad now goes. You can see Rocky Butte in the background. And this is now, the 50s, what it looks like. And this is an aerial view now that the high school has been built. You can see the golf course off to the west. And now you can kind of get a sense of what does that highway look like. You got 2 lanes going each direction, and some development that's starting to come in around up in the Lentz Roseway neighborhood, already pretty well built out. Go fast forward another decade. You can see that if you've ever been on 82nd, you know that it's 2 north, 2 south, and a center turn lane. Back in the 60s, it was no center turn lane and there was parking on each side. So again, you can kind of visualize how things have changed through the years. Looking at a spot where we looked at from the 30s, you can see the motel. This is where Sandy intersects. This is again Washington and the river in the background. Pretty well built out in terms of the infrastructure of what we now know today. 70s. This is one of the primary kind of aesthetics, if you've been on 82nd, is the really huge electrical lines that really dominate the visuals. And then in the 80s, you can see that. Now in the 80s, things changed with Highway 213, which is the I-205 bridge was built. This was 1982. Pieces of 205 had been completed along the east side. It's a whole nother history that's interesting, but it wasn't the through route that it was because the bridge was not built. The bridge comes in 82, and kind of what we now know today, this is at the Abernathy Bridge, which is more south on the 205, carrying tens of thousands of vehicles. A lot of freight comes through I-205. And 82nd now, which used to be, and this is not that long ago, in the 80s, 82nd used to be the main north-south thoroughfare on the east side of Portland. It was kind of that dividing line. It was the way that people got up and down. Now all of a sudden we have this total different look, and you've got the 205 to get people north-south. So I went and took a few Google snapshots of some of those spots that I showed you along the way. Now, so many of you will be like, yeah, no duh, I've been there. Some of you who have not been there, you can see what that looks like. Again, Washington in the background. This is that Halsey intersection. Pretty ugly, to be quite honest. If you haven't been there, there's no tree canopy, a lot of noise. It's pretty gnarly. If you go a little bit further south here, this is at that Division intersection. This is one of our partners, Apano. It has their headquarters there. You go a little bit farther south, and you're getting a sense of what it is, right? 2 lanes north, 2 lanes south in that middle turn lane. One of the things that's about the history of 82nd is this discussion around who runs and who should run 213 has been going on for decades, actually. And I'm going to actually go, this term, jurisdictional transfer, is what I want to really highlight right now. ODOT has owned 213, has really managed 213 for decades. And there's been a big push by advocates saying, no, this is not a highway. This should be a locally controlled road that can meet the needs of the residents. And so what's happened is it's been largely neglected. You can even see just in a pavement, like what the quality is. This is not uncommon along large sections. You can also really see one of the major problems of 82nd over here. These sidewalks are quite narrow. This is actually a fairly wide sidewalk compared to many places. Many of them are interrupted by poles, signage, etc. And so you can imagine people are going 35, 40, 45 miles an hour, quite literally, as you walk around this pole, 1-2 feet next to you. So it's a pretty uncomfortable place to be a pedestrian, with a few exceptions where things have been developed. So ODOT and PBOT have been together talking, advocates have been discussing this idea of transferring jurisdiction from ODOT to PBOT. And finally, it's going to happen. It actually happens officially tomorrow at City Council. And with that transfer has come $185 million that comes some from the state, some from the feds, and some from ODOT or from the city. And so there's these phases that are happening around that change. And so phase one is things like lighting, ADA compliance, ramps, bicycle pedestrian crossings, improvements, repaving sections. And that's pretty well baked in. It's $80 million and it has to be spent quite quickly in the next couple of years. The next 105 million is where we're going to talk today, which is kind of dreaming about the future of what could 82nd Avenue look like in the future. And so that's where my role comes in. So Representative Pham, who's what state representative out in East Portland, set aside some money that she had some capacity to really allocate to what she wanted to allocate it to funding my position, and then some of our partners to do outreach to the community, really hear the voice of what the community wants to see along 82nd Avenue when it gets shifted from ODOT to PBOT, and when these millions and millions of dollars are spent in that corridor. So my job is, again, to do that outreach. Part of the reason I'm here, quite frankly. So a few statistics, things you should know about 82nd Avenue. PBOT has identified it as a high crash corridor. If you paid any attention to the news, you've seen injuries and deaths along 82nd Avenue for years. It's quite common. It's a dangerous street, just to be quite frank. If you look at census data, it's one of the most diverse places in Oregon. And so you can go there and see people of all shapes and sizes and colors, and it's a beautiful place, and it's very diverse, and it's really wonderful to see that. Bus line 42, which runs along 82nd, has the highest use of anywhere in the metropolitan corridor. And one of the things that's interesting about the 72nd is that ridership has stayed level throughout the pandemic, even as in other routes, it has dipped quite significantly. And that's been around 14,000 daily weekday riders. It also is a corridor, at the highest level, but it also is the 11th highest in terms of delays. So it kind of gives you a sense of how that space is used. The corridor is not homogeneous, right? So on the north section, there's about 15,000 daily vehicles. In the central section, it's around 20,000. In the central southern, it's around 20 to 27,000. That's the counts in 2019. We know traffic patterns have changed during COVID, and that's data that is a little dated as a result, but it gives you a sense of where we're at. And from curb to curb is 60 feet almost throughout the whole corridor. And that's something, just to provide us a little bit of inflexibility, that's something that won't change. So that's going to be set. And as we dream, that's something that you should try not dreaming outside of. Okay, so what are we going to do with ourselves today? We're going to consider, how should we spend that $105 million? What should it look like? And so here's some things to think about. You all will have other questions to think about. And what we're going to do is we're going to break out into groups of around 4 people. And you're going to spend some time thinking about, how should the road look in the future? What trade-offs would you like to make for transit or pedestrians or cyclists or cars? Whose needs get met or not met when we make some of those trade-offs. One of the realities about mega projects is that displacement often occurs. It often goes hand in hand. And so what kind of anti-displacement work can or should be done to assist the people who live along the corridor? What kind of things can we do around placemaking? What kind of investments in tree canopy and green space and park space can be made? How do you deal with the disruption that comes with construction? What role does housing play? Like, how can we meet the needs of housing in Oregon, and how can 82nd Avenue corridor and this work do some of that work and some of that lifting? Are there zoning changes that should be made? What kind of transit improvements should be made? What kind of resources can be leveraged? So these are the type of questions that I'm asking you all to bop out into your groups and to think about. So I'm going to unshare this real quick. And in the chat, can you all see the chat? I think so. Andre, did you? Yes, you did. So in the chat, you're going to see a link to a Google Doc. It's actually Google Slides. I'm going to push you out into groups, and you're going to talk amongst your groups, open up that Google slide, and claim one of the group numbers, I guess, for lack of a better word. You can do all sorts of things. You can literally just put bullets like this is what we'd want to do. You can sketch on a piece of paper, take a picture with your phone and upload it onto that on that slide. You can doodle something on a notepad and put it on your slide. But the point is for you and your neighbors to dream, think, be creative of what you think 82nd Avenue should look like. We're going to do that for about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, and I'll bebop around to the different groups if you all kind of run out of energy or you have questions. I'll try and be there to address those. After that 20 minutes, we're going to come back together and we're going to share our dreams, see where we're the same, see where we're different. And I want to do like a huge caveat, which is, of course, this is unscientific. Of course, we're missing a lot of data. Of course, we're missing a lot of the minutia. That's okay. Like what we're really doing today is dreaming, having some fun, interacting with each other, sharing some expertise. We're all going to come at this with a different lens. And so that's part of the beauty of it, is to come at it almost a little bit more blank and to dream big around it. Before I put you into groups, make sure you click that link. I think you should be able to see it in the chat, even if you didn't, but go into that Google link and I'll pop around from place to place. Any questions before I push you out into different groups? This is the teacher in me. It's called wait time. I have to be patient. Any questions? Okay. It says we have 25 of you today. So I'm going to put you into 5 groups of 5, and you can choose one of those slides as your own to do your brainstorm. So without further ado, here we go. Be creative. Good luck.
All right, I think it keeps me in the host room, so I can pop in and just
Perfect. And
I'll
can you
hop into one.
do you have the capacity to hop around? Like it lets you do that?
Yeah, it lets me hop around. Yep. And I'll probably just hop
Awesome.
into one of them that's smaller. I see Izzy's in one, so I'm not going to go to the one that Izzy's in.
Perfect.
Sweet. All right, I'll see you.
Okay, sounds good.
How much total time do folks have remaining, I guess? Oh, you're muted, sorry.
9-10 minutes, maybe.
Okay. I just, in the room I was in, that was a question. They were like, we don't know how much time we have, so. All right, Ray, I'm throwing you in a, oh, he made it. I'm gonna assign you to I'm gonna assign you to a room. All right.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. Sweet. Give me 1 sec.
Is this still the 82nd Avenue thing?
Yep. Yep. All right. You should be assigned to room 4.
All right, folks. We are coming back together. People are kind of exiting their breakout rooms. We'll give everyone a second to do that. Anyone has a great about 15-second joke, here is your chance. Here's your platform.
Why did the engineer cross the road?
Why?
That's what they did last year.
See? That's just wonderful, Rob. I appreciate that. Okay.
I apologize to any engineer in the room.
I think I saw a tomato thrown at a camera. That was painful for them, but good for me. All right. Okay. So thank you for dreaming. Thank you for thinking. I'm going to share out the slides so that you'll be able to see group 1, group 2, etc. And I'm just going to call on the group and have them have their person go. Now, keep in mind, we've got 12 minutes or something. So, whoops. Let's keep in mind, try and be short and sweet so people can move along. Thumbs up. Can we see this? Yeah. All right. The dream team. Who's our dream team speaker?
That's gonna be me. I've been the delegate. So yeah, we had a good discussion. We started off talking about kind of the trade-off of, putting bikes on 82nd, and it's already kind of more of a transit focused street. Most of the people who live in the area and these communities use transit. So that kind of trade-off right there is that, most likely the alternative for bike access would be to, create greenways along each side to parallel this 82nd Avenue, so more on the neighborhood streets. And then I guess, yeah, I'm trying to think of what else we kind of went through. And as far as kind of what the design looks like for, maybe introducing transit is maybe having some kind of elevated platforms or something that really, kind of elevates, I guess, more ways than one, transit. And then, yeah, it's a very busy corridor. And you talked about housing and housing in the areas, as much as we want to put housing on it, would a lot of people want to live on such a busy corridor? Would it be too loud? Would it be too noisy? And then as far as displacement goes, we talked about, I guess one thing we brought up was just making sure to work with an organization to keep folks, who own a house or provide them with some kind of help and assistance to gain home ownership. So I brought up Proud Ground as a good example of a group that does good work, at least up here in North Portland. And then I guess also talking about displacement as if we were to physically expand the right of way and displace businesses. So we don't really want to widen the corridor since it's already pretty well established. Yeah. I don't know if there's anybody else wants to bring anything up.
That's great. We're gonna go to group 2 just in a nature, to honor time, make sure everyone has a chance, and then we can come circle back around. So group 2, who's your talker?
Yeah, so I'm speaking for group 2. Some of our things that popped up were concerns with improvements looking to increase displacement. So finding tools and mechanisms to prevent that or minimize that. So the land banking or community land trusts don't want to have, these improvements for infrastructure and safety to come at the cost of the folks who currently live there. And then another thing we talked about was nodes. It's not like a one size fits all. That northern section of 82nd is a lot different than the central section, and so different uses and layouts along the stretch. And also there's different neighborhoods. So not necessarily identifying, but supporting that neighborhood character as you traverse in and along 82nd Avenue. And also just, being aware of 82nd Avenue isn't just all the same along the entire corridor. And so finding ways to, I guess, work within those stretches and support them. So
Great. Thank you. Group 3, group 4, who would like to be our person?
There we go. Sorry, had to find my button. So our group is, it doesn't show it, but we are People First and the People First group. So to establish that big vision first is to establish the hierarchy who we're trying to serve, who we're prioritizing first when we're designing the right of way here. And that is people first. And among that group, people is our most vulnerable. So really establishing that clear hierarchy, and that will help inform the rest of the design process and planning. But also prioritizing the community and not through traffic. I think that you also have to establish that. Are you, what are you trying to accomplish here? What's your goal? And really make that conscious decision. I think too many planning projects tiptoe around that question and end up prioritizing through traffic instead of the community, which is probably what they started out intending to do. Let's see. And just making sure that people walking, biking, people with disabilities feel comfortable, safe, and welcome. Welcome is the big word here. And if you look at this photo, that was a picture one of our group presented that shows the slalom course that people with disabilities and using mobility devices need to sort of navigate. And so that really has to be taken into account. We had a great, we were thinking, move those tables, move the extra furniture into the street. And you can still provide for transit with the bus islands. Anyway, we had lots of great ideas about about bike lanes and bus islands and where the parklets could go. But people first.
Great.
Does my group have anything else? Did I miss something important?
That's great. Okay. Group 5.
I guess I could provide a summary, but feel free to jump in, anyone, if I don't emphasize the right points. So we talked about a lot of similar topics. And the first comment was, make it people space, like trade car space for people, prioritize people. So those might mean ADA enhancements, crossings. It might also mean narrowing the travel lanes. It could also mean widening sidewalks to increase access and comfort. And also prioritizing traffic, like, Rose City Lanes bus lane project, enhanced transit corridor, but also stepping away from level service thresholds as the primary focus or measure of a successful corridor and focus on people first. But one of the things we kept coming up on was like how you retain the existing character and diversity of businesses and residents along the corridor. This is one of Oregon State's most diverse census tracts in the lower southeast area along 82nd Avenue. And also another point of conversation was like, as changes happen at 82nd Avenue, what will that interplay be between I-205 and 82nd and the shift in traffic patterns? And we were really concerned about like anti-displacement, working with local community partners. This might be Apano or further north, Cali, Living Verde, on how do you create land banks so the existing residents and businesses can retain there as investments and opportunities come into the community. So this might be a public-private partnership between like the Portland Housing Bureau, other resources and agencies, working with local community development groups, maybe Rose CDC, for example, further to the south. One thing that kept coming up was expanding the urban tree canopy, because as we know, Lentz Town Center and parts of 82nd Avenue have some of the most significant urban heat island effects. So one thought was to make this a tree line corridor along the perimeter as right away beyond the curb is accessed. But this might be some trade-offs as we make a people first space. Like, does that mean transit? We don't have transit corridors along the length of it, but rather it's prioritized along intersections and whatnot. But just again, retain that people first strategy. And one thing that came up was incorporate more food cart options. And that could be like necessary zoning changes, but policies and resources made available to the community. And just getting information out to the local businesses so they can access these resources, have support, and navigate the changes as they occur. We felt was really key to retain the existing character and supporting growth while welcoming in new residents and opportunities along the corridor. So that was a big overview.
Thank you. Group 6. Who's your brave speaker?
I'll go since I know how to take my voice off of mute, I guess. Just a really quick, so not repeat what other people have said, bury the electric line, finding a way to provide some access there, making sure that transit moves at a higher priority than cars so that we don't lose that moving people and cargo ability. Fixing that bus rapid transit possibly in a center lane so that we can ensure that there's accessibility protections, and making sure and looking possibly of having that a shared bike lane facility that can be whatever. Intentional community engagement to ensure involvement and buy-in from people, cargo, employees. A lot of time we spent on the need for not just new affordable housing, but preserving existing affordable housing, looking at property tax freezes for long-time residents, other potential opportunities to make sure that those are meaningful and measurable, and looking at what we've learned from other transit-oriented development before we make the same mistakes. Safe routes to shopping sort of encouragement program to make sure that people are still visiting those businesses, integrating art into projects so it's not as ugly as Zachary thinks it is, making phase 1 compatible with a future project so that we don't have to rip things out. How do we set up future success for the south of the Portland area so that it doesn't just end in a sort of invisible ugly line? Look at zoning to encourage, enable mixed use development, inclusionary zoning benefits, creating space making or place making along the corridor, plazas, play spaces, parks, etc., that can add value to businesses and residents. And finally, investigate making parking, those big parking frontage areas like the big stores or the gas stations or the car places friendly to pedestrians and ensure business access. It's big challenges.
Great. Thank you, team. We appreciate that very much. And I really want to be cognizant of time, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen. 2 thoughts just as we go. The first thought is around 82nd Avenue. If you come away from this and you go, gosh, I'm kind of interested, I'd like to know more. There's been a ton of outreach through the years, especially in the late teens of the 2000s. BPS did a big report, PBOT's done a big report, the Jade District led by Apano's done a big report. Those are all available and they're in the public. You can go to PBOT's site and look at the 82nd Avenue report. You can find the other reports online, and they're fascinating and they're wonderful in that they vision do a lot of the visioning that you all did today, and they do it through the lens of people who live and work and play along that corridor. And so again, if you walk away and you go, gosh, that's great, I'd love to know more, there is a lot more, and we hope to build on that as we continue to do outreach. That's the first thing. The second thing is a shameless plug, and the shameless plug is Oregon Walks turns 31, but COVID, we're saying it's 30. And we have our Walk Stars event that comes up here next month, and it's a chance to us to celebrate Oregon Walks. It's a chance to invite people to want to know a little bit more. It's a short event. It's just an hour, and we'd love for you to come. It's free to attend. Obviously, you can come and give us money, and we'd love you, but really, we just want people to come and learn more about Oregon Walks. So if you're interested, I threw a link down in the chat. You can click on that, get a ticket, and come join us for Walk Stars as well. Thank you all so much. It is 11:30. So I'm going to say